These mumbles on Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Madam President, Commissioners, good morning. It's now 11:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Director Wong. Welcome everyone to our pre-commission session. We'll go ahead and start with general housekeeping items. If any commissioner has a question or concern that they would like to bring up. All right. Seeing none. Any discussion about the agenda? Seeing none there. Director Wong,
Okay,
back to you.
Madam President, thank you. Commissioners, several things to share with you today. First off, though, as you probably heard already on the news, the Meta, formerly known as Facebook, Data Processing Center was announced at a formal meeting today in CUNA. The state and CUNA was selected over multiple other competitors, and it was very nice to hear the tremendous thanks that the lead from Meta gave not only to all of the partners, but especially when it came to the Eddy County Highway District for infrastructure support. And they were one of the things, and I want to let you know that several of us have been involved with this for about a year now. One of the things that really pushed us over the top was the ability for the commission to, again, do very interesting things when it came to infrastructure. We were complimented prior to this on the impact fee program, which allowed us to participate with the appropriate infrastructure bills that they're looking at, and this was a huge draw. So that being said, the press release is out and such, but there were very few commemorative coins that were offered for this. I know Commissioner Goldthorpe has one, but I wanted Gary Inselman to come up here because Gary and I chewed a lot of dirt on this together and such. So Gary, I have this for you. Guard it with your life because I know it's
Well done, Gary.
More great and more to follow because, again, without getting into the specific details, this is basically just phase one of a great future for CUNA as we move forward. I'd also like to congratulate Margaret. You remember who Margaret is, correct? Our intern who briefed you on Osage, did all that tremendous work. They got a project going. Everybody excited about it. Well, I want to let you all know that Margaret is our newest intern to hire. Full-time team member here. She's accepted a position in development and technical services, which Gary is smiling about. Justin is not. But she'll be part-time until she graduates. We don't want to interfere with any time schooling, but at the end of the day, it's just another success story for what we do here with interns going forward.
Oh, that's terrific. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
If I don't ask Bruce this question or tell him this, I'll forget. Yesterday, I participated in the DECA competition that happens every year and met with Clay Long, who's been a friend forever, and told him that we'll probably be reaching out to him about an internship program. He was very excited.
Tremendous, and that process is already ongoing. So thank you, Commissioner. I wanted to also let you know, Commissioners, in front of you, you have two things. First off, there is a single sheet that our great team in Plans and Projects put together regarding where we are in the prioritization process. We'll brief you later and such, but we just want to make sure that you are up to speed as to where we are in this very important journey that we're taking. Secondly, in front of you is this. And this is the Undersecretary of Policy for the U.S. on the RAISE grants. This will give you everything, top to bottom, on what the criteria is, what the criteria isn't, the rules of engagement, and all those great things. So that being said, as I shared with you last week, your staff has an idea. And your staff has an idea on how we can leverage, we believe successfully, this grant program. As you recall, we teed up the fact about sidewalks, filling gaps, doing something really, really big across this. Well, Justin and Ryan and the team have already been working this now for a couple weeks on a strategy for a proposal for you to consider. So I'd like to bring them up, and then I'll get back into the director's report when they're done, but they have some information for you as to where we are and where we are going to go. And so Justin.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Lucas and Mr. Head. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Director, members of the Commission. As was stated, just wanted to provide an update on the RAISE grant opportunity. Just a few points before I jump into the idea that we've come up with. This is a new grant program, RAISE grant. It's part of the new infrastructure bill that was passed by the federal government. It's a tight timeline. This is a key point because everything is due by April 14th. So we don't have very much time. And these grants, it's not a single sheet of paper. These are long documents that are submitted, 40, 50 pages, maps, technical information. So it takes a lot of effort to put one of these together. I do want to highlight new criteria, new focus areas, and really a new approach from the federal this administration. And that's key because it means that some of the old ideas that we may have had aren't really a great fit for this new program. So I want to highlight that right up front. Another highlight, $5 million minimum award for both planning and implementation. ACHD does not have anything ready for an implementation grant, which is basically a construction grant. That would mean you have to have all the design and the environmental complete to go for the implementation. So if we do go for something, it would be for a planning grant, which is also a minimum of $5 million. Planning would be design and environmental, typically. We carefully reviewed the grant criteria and requirements. There was a webinar on February 10th, which Tom Furch, our funding coordinator, participated in. The large PowerPoint in front of you was the main focus of that webinar. I'll just highlight some of the criteria that really were emphasized during the webinar. Areas of persistent poverty and historically disadvantaged communities is a real theme of this grant program, and that's something new coming from the administration. Safety, environmental sustainability, motorized and non-motorized travel, health and safety risks, modal shift, reduction in emissions is a big one. Proactively addressing racial equity and barriers to opportunity, including automobile dependence as a form of a barrier, highly emphasized. And increased affordability and accessibility for users, particularly non-motorized travelers, those with disabilities, walking, cycling, or using transit. So that's not all of them. There's a whole list of criteria within the PowerPoint, but those were the highlights that were really focused on during the grant webinar program. So to jump into some of the nuts and bolts here, ACHD, as I stated, would pursue a planning level grant. So we would pursue a grouping of projects that would be focused on design and the environmental review. And that process is substantial. To get to $5 million, it's not just a single project, it would be a suite of projects that we would look at. We believe that there is a path towards success here. And that path has kind of three main elements. The first is that we believe these projects should be focused towards these historically disadvantaged communities as defined by the federal government. So there's a tool online, and we can use this tool to see what those what census tracts fall into that category. And I'll be very straightforward with you. It's not very many areas within Ada County. That's just the facts. Although the areas that we'll emphasize, and let me hand out this map with there are some areas of our county that I think are a really good fit for this grant program that fit within this category of historically disadvantaged or areas of persistent poverty. So the orange area, that polygon on the map, is one of the large areas. There's a few other smaller areas in our county, but this is the largest and most contiguous area. It's obviously portions of Garden City, basically Garden City east of Glenwood, and it's portions of the Boise Bench area. So that's the area there that we believe is the most focused, and that we believe there's success there. Fortunately, we have a lot of projects that are needed and have been identified in that exact area. And so what we did was we took that area and we matched it to projects that were either in the out years of the integrated 5-year work plan, or that we've scoped that had been identified in a neighborhood plan and on a city priority list. And we tried to match up a grouping of projects with that area, which is what you see before you. We were able to get up to that $5 million threshold for planning, which would be environmental review and design. Various projects included there. I'm not going to list them all, but it's Irving, Franklin, which has come up, sections of Fairview, various streets within Garden City connecting into the Greenbelt and other areas. We think there's a really good story here. I think it really fits the grant program, and we would like to move forward with the projects as described. A few other keys to success that we've identified. As stated, we believe these have already been identified by the cities as areas they're interested in too. So there's already, I think, a good synergy around this idea. These are also projects that ACHD can lead. So we have the ability with our unique agency structure, with the right-of-way and anything that comes up with these projects, we believe that we can lead these projects all the way to success, to construction. And so that's, I think it's a key point that we wanted to focus on as we develop a grant program. So with the map there and those projects, this is, as you say, we're at the beginning of an idea. We wanted to share that very closely with you today. Also, I did want to emphasize that if we want to do this, we need to move forward. We're at a time where there's not a lot of time to really discuss it. We're glad to do that, but with the time frame we're on to get something ready by April 14th, there has to be some pretty fast action on our part to make this a successful grant opportunity. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Justin. Pardon me?
Oh, thank you, sir. So you'll see on the top of the map, the theme that we are going after as part of this program is access to opportunity, which I think fits under the criteria that are being described by the federal government. And I think it really does describe these projects very well.
Great. Thank you very much, Justin. Commissioners, any questions?
Madam President?
Yes, Justin, I know that what I'm going to ask you now won't fit into this tight timeline, and these do perfectly. I expect that there will be other opportunities similar to this that will open up with a further timeline that might very well allow us to fill a large number of the sidewalk gaps throughout the county. And in fact, might, if we see an opportunity from the standpoint of economic development equity, to help CUNA with their overpass and a few things like that. So that's.
I think you'll keep a close eye on that, and if an opportunity presents itself, you'll
Madam
come back to
President.
us, and then we'll be able to accelerate and move on that.
Correct, Madam President, Commissioners. It's a dynamic funding time right now. There's a lot of new things being presented that we're learning about, and as those come forward, we will certainly be looking to match up all kinds of projects to these opportunities. This one specifically was very targeted, and to meet the timeline we're on, we thought this was the best approach.
Right, and you jumped in, you saw the opportunity, and I like that. I like that access to opportunity. Thank you, Justin. Commissioner Pickering.
Yep, thank you, Madam President. Justin, directors, team, I just want to say thank you so much. This is exactly what I was hoping we could do, and I really applaud you looking at the integrated 5-year work plan and trying to link these other projects together and see how can we take it to the next level. And the poverty piece is huge, and most of these folks don't have access to their own cars and things like that. So there's a huge need for these, and these types of gaps have, as you know, have persisted for years. So I have ultimate confidence in you guys that you'll be able to not only apply for this and hopefully get the funding, but like you said, meet the needs and usher in this opportunity to deliver it in a great way for our communities and build it in a way that's perfect. So just really impressed. I think to your point, Justin, this is a perfect time. The cities are ready for these projects to come together. I think with the Pathways Plan, all of these little nuggets that have been building that you have all been a part of in some form or fashion, I think you guys have had a great opportunity to see kind of where are all these things coming together and how can this opportunity perhaps connect those dots in a really great way. So I'm extremely impressed and thank you for presenting it to us. And I love that you attached this PowerPoint so I can geek out about it a little bit more and see if there's anything else that I can learn about it. And just again, major kudos and thank you.
Yeah, this is a good start. Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you, Justin. This is great. I'm glad that the focus that the commission has had has pushed for looking at livable neighborhoods and livable streets and the impact that has while we don't do land use and healthcare and has a direct impact on people's lives. And there are studies out there. One if you haven't already seen it, almost 2 years ago, Chris Stanley did an analysis for the city of Boise on health indicators and the dangers. And in fact, many of the neighborhoods with the riskiest health indicators are those very ones you've identified on this map. So I don't know if you use that study, but it's very comprehensive, and it indicates one of the things that is a truism is those neighborhoods tend to be left behind next to busy freeways. So it's not too surprising that the places people haven't invested in those neighborhoods for safety and therefore sort of left behind are along the connector and along Chinden. I would encourage you to take, Philippi is such an important link down to the other part of the freeway and those same neighborhoods along 84. So if you need a little more in order to get up to $5 million, keep going down Philippi because that neighborhood south of Overland is very isolated. And it's probably some of the same indicators. I'm sure you've looked at some of those. But I'm glad that Philippi is on there because that's basically the only link, safety link. So I would look to that. I'd also suggest that this is the very reason why, and we could incorporate, I think, into our grant that we're working on updating our speed management policies, because instead of leaving it up to a neighborhood that might be well-heeled and well-organized to decide which ones are prioritized, it should be prioritized on what the actual safety is in that neighborhood. And so neighborhoods like these kind of get left behind because they may not be as well organized. Lots of rentals, lots of people who don't own the property on the streets. And so the speed management policy, I think updating that is a real logical part of incorporating that into this, because it's exactly how we should be prioritizing based on actual risk, a prioritization based on actual risk to the neighborhoods, not based on whether the neighborhood happens to be better organized than others. So excellent. This makes me excited to see that we aren't just isolating, we've actually recognized the impact of transportation on all those things: persistent poverty, safety, health, auto dependence, has a huge impact. And so since we're the ones in this county, I think the federal government, when they get this, is like, boy, somebody's got to, how come they're doing it this way in Ada County? Why isn't it this city or that city that's applying? I just want to make sure that too, this is a separate pot. We're not, as it were, forcing the feds to choose between this raise grant and the State Street one that the city of Boise is applying for separately. That's on a different criteria or a different set.
Mr. Lucas.
Madam President, Commissioner Henson, so our understanding is, and we've been working very carefully with the city of Boise and VRT on the VRT raise grant. They're going for an implementation grant, which is a different pot of money if you want to study.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
So we would not be directly competing with them for that type of enhancement.
Yeah, because I know we're supporting theirs, and so I assume they'll support this one.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner McKinney?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. Hey, Justin, just a couple of questions on this. Do these raised grants require matching funds from us?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, yes, and thank you for that question. The typical match for a raised grant is 20%. So yes, there are matching funds required.
Okay, so for this 5 million, we'd have to pony up 1 million.
Correct,
Okay.
approximately.
Next question. Did you say that all of these projects that are shown here are things that are already on the 5-year work plan that we've already been planning on?
Yes.
So the costs for them, we've already been looking forward to, both from the design and construction standpoint. So it's not like we're plopping a new thing. Like, we get a grant that imposes things that we hadn't already planned for. So we've already planned for the costs for these to construct these.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, yes, these are previously identified projects, most of which are already in the integrated 5-year work plan for design in an out year, which we refer to like 24, 25, or 26. There may be a few in there that are identified in a neighborhood plan that would also be coming into the integrated 5-year work plan in the future, but the vast majority are already identified in the integrated 5-year.
So, and I guess part of the reason I'm asking this, is it possible that, does the integrated 5-year work plan perhaps, and I imagine you have to look at the numbers to answer this question completely, but is it possible that the work plan right now already has about $1 million going toward design of these programs, and so the matching funds are already in the pipeline?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, yes, it's very possible. It may not be dollar for dollar. The federal design is more expensive than the local design, so there is an increase that occurs. But at 20%, we're still getting a good bang for our buck, for sure.
So is that because federal design requirements are more exacting than what we would normally? Because I would think that, the ADA requirements don't change, whether it's federal money or local money, do they? What changes?
President May, Commissioner McKinney, typically it's the environmental requirements and the environmental review that's required through NEPA, which is not something that ACHD has to use when we go through the local design process. So there's extra environmental requirements that are in the design process, and the federal projects are administered by ITD, and there's other things that are it just turns out to be a more expensive process. But at 20%, though, for ACHD, we're still getting a better deal than if we were to design it for ourselves today.
So I guess what you're saying is that to add sidewalks to existing city streets requires extensive environmental analysis?
So, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, there is an environmental review required. There's different levels of environmental review. Typically, for projects that are within the right-of-way or directly adjacent to the right-of-way, there's not major impacts, and we're able to mitigate them if they are identified. But it is part of the process we have to go through.
Okay, and those processes change depending upon whether the money comes from the federal government versus whether we spend it ourselves. I would think that kind of surprises me, because I would have thought that EPA requirements apply across the board no matter who's paying for it.
No, it's Commissioner McKinney, Madam President. Specifically, the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act, is specifically tied to federal aid dollars.
I see.
And
Okay.
it's not really the EPA, it's this national act that was passed years ago. Some states do have their own environmental requirements and regulations, like California, Washington, and others, but in Idaho, there is no local environmental process that is required.
Okay.
So that's how it comes
All
together.
right, okay. Then just one last question, just to make sure that looking at this map, is that large north-south leg, is that Philippi Street that you were talking about a few minutes ago?
Madam President,
Okay.
Commissioner, yes, it is.
All right. So if we get additional monies through these grants to cover the design costs and planning costs for these projects, and we've already got the, more or less, at least we're looking forward to the construction costs at whatever stage, then how do we handle, we've already, intended to allocate additional monies to the design of these projects, which now would be covered by these grants, what would be the presumption to do with those funds that would now be covered by this grant?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, through the integrated 5-year work plan process, if we do actually get the grant, which is not a guarantee,
Right.
if we were to get the grant, when we next update the integrated 5-year work plan, we would indicate in that, during that planning process, the amount of federal dollars now allocated toward these projects, and it would essentially free up additional local dollars that could be allocated to other projects, which we would do in coordination with the commission
Okay,
and through our
all right.
prioritization process.
At that time.
At that
during
time,
the-
correct.
Okay,
Okay.
good, thank
Is that
you.
good? All
One
right,
quick-
thank you,
one quick
Commissioner.
question
One
and
quick
comment.
question, Commissioner
Yeah,
Hanson.
There's a number of big issues with brownwater on the bench, and I know on our policy of go in once, whether there's a way of incorporating some of the work that the city wants to do, but it's real expensive to get some of those at the same time we're in there fixing those or replacing those sidewalks or making those connections. They can replace those ancient pipes that are producing potentially dangerous water. So integrating that, and that often is a big indicator of where poverty is. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, Malad there at Philippi, where you have it come down, also connects over to Nez Perce under our Nez Perce Pond project. It's got this island of prosperity around Hillcrest, but on either end, you don't have that. So it might be wise to sort of include some of the issues.
First thing, just get the application
Nez Perce.
going
I just want-
and see if we're even going to be lucky
Yeah.
enough to be in receipt of that. So is there a consensus with the
Oh, yes.
commission? to move
Absolutely.
forward?
Yes.
Commissioner Goldthorpe, for the record,
Yes.
Absolutely.
Pickering, Commissioner
Yes.
McKinney, Hanson,
Yes.
and May. Go forward, Mr. Lucas and Mr. Head. Thank you very much. We're excited. Look forward to progress. Director Wong.
Commissioners, yesterday I had the very excellent opportunity of meeting a group of folks that lead research and development centers for college students. And what I found out from this group is that they actually put together project teams to solve and address policy issues, project issues, technical issues, strategy issues across the board. Organizations will hand them a project or an issue, and then the students, who are led by a student team leader, faculty, all this thing, they do all their things. They come back and they say, "Here's our recommendation." I was very impressed with the discussion, because I did not know this existed, and so I want to let you know that I will most likely be coming to you in the very near future with some thoughts on moving forward with this grant, with this group. And what's very interesting, and you all know what the cost is for design and outside counsel and such. I saw the number one, or I think the highest cost right there was $4,000 for an entire project. They're paying their students, I think, like $1 a day. So they get credits and stuff for it. So it's another opportunity to maybe get a different purview or a different perspective on some of the things we're doing, to include standing up new facilities, prioritization process, all the different things across the board. So I will continue to explore that and see if there's an opportunity there. But again, I was very impressed with this program, and the program is called Research and Business Development Center. And if you're
Very good.
interested, I'm more than happy to send
Director
you
Wong,
some.
a few years ago, oh gosh, probably about 15, maybe even 20 years ago, the city of Eagle did that with some students from the U of I. They came down and did some charrettes for the downtown development and comp plan, and really got some good ideas, and it was really worth the time and the investment with the students. So I'm glad you're pursuing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's could be very profitable on all sides of the spectrum. I'd also like to let you know that I'm taking advantage of an opportunity from Mr. Chandler regarding additional office space over at our Orchard facility. Mr. Chandler has let us know that he has another, I think, 3,300 square feet that is not being used, and with our continued growth and such with our Development Technical Services group, he's offering this at $5 under what the per square foot that the normal cost is, based because we're great tenants and your checks do cash and such. So we're looking into that. I think it's a 2 to 5 year lease, and it already coincides with the one we have there. And to me, it's an excellent opportunity, but I want to make sure you know that we are pursuing that. On the state funding dollars that we may get from ACHD, and I had an opportunity to speak to Senator Dan Hertog earlier this morning, and I think you did also. There is, as you know, we've proposed the requirements that the Eddy County Highway District may have. So we will be coming to you shortly with a proposed strategy based on the types of dollars we may get, and again, may get. We're looking at a $30 million level, a $40 million level, and a $50 million level of those projects that we could use those funds, or you could use those funds for, to keep on track or accelerate. At the same time, if we get those dollars, to merge those again into the 3 sites that we're starting to stand up, and maybe that can accelerate some of the operations out there. But at the end of the day, I want to let you all know that the number one project that we will recommend, of course, is all those associated with Highway 16, because that was the impetus of when our lobbyists spoke to the legislature that these were the key issues. And at the end of the day, I'm fairly confident that's one of the reasons why we are, guarantees the wrong term, but again, confident that we'll be seeing a lot of dollars coming back in. So again, we'll have those to you shortly, but we are including things like the CUNA overpass, the Linder bridges, potential Linder overpass, and such, and we'll make sure you have those information as we get there earlier. So, Commissioners, that is my director's report. Again, a lot of great news today, and again, I want to thank you for your support of our thoughts on access to opportunity. I will remind you, this is a fast train. There's a lot of great ideas, but this is a fast train, and we are focusing on what we truly believe is reachable. And but I also want to assure you, Justin, don't let me speed on this, that all the other projects in there are not being deferred or delayed. Those stay on track. This goes above and beyond, so that's why we're going very quickly on this moving forward.
Madam President?
Thank you. Okay, one quick question, Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, quick question. In the language, I'm looking at Steve, in the language on the state funding of dollars, Highway 16, CUNA overpass, that's great. If the language could also not eliminate the possibility of fixing things that state highways have created and we haven't gotten monies to fix. I'm thinking of Chinden, Eagle, the Emerald overpass, these chronic things that we say, well, it's the state. And so there's things that need to be fixed that have been there for a long time. And
fences on bridges.
Yeah, exactly. So I want sure the language in the legislation doesn't preclude ITD and ACHD from working together. Use that to say, okay, here's some things.
Madam President, Commissioner,
it's been around a long
Commissioner
time.
Hanson, very good point. Again, as you know, that'll be up to the folks that are crafting that, but we will definitely have our lobbyists ensure that that message is carried forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good point. All right.
Madam President, it is now time for your...
Welcome, everyone, to our February 16th commission meeting. Please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance.
Flag of the United States to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, thank you. All right, I had started last time I sat in this chair of recognizing individual staff members for their accomplishment and great efforts here at the district. And so I want to cue that back up, and I'm going to start recognizing individual departments. And so today I would like to take an opportunity to recognize and thank our maintenance team for all their hard work, efforts, and amazing operations that they have accomplished. Whether it's a challenging snow event, a torrential downpour, or everything in between, I know the citizens of Ada County can be confident that our crews are out at all hours, tackling the roads so we can all safely get where we need to go. Our maintenance team is also hard at work planning for 2 new maintenance complexes and exploring new protocols for sidewalks and bike paths, all while never missing a beat in maintaining and repairing ACHD's infrastructure. Our maintenance team does an excellent job with pride and with energy. They have truly set the mark with their dedication in all that they do. Ms. Behringer, thank you to you and your team for your commitment to ACHD. You are all truly great ACHD ambassadors, and you are appreciated.
Madam President, if I could, I know it's out of order, but this morning, we actually received a whole bunch of tremendous thank yous from the Boise PD regarding her team's response to some of the very slick conditions that all of a sudden appeared. Nobody was prepared for that and such, but Jennifer's team responded, and Boise PD was because we had to close a couple roads. And so they were very, very happy. So it just goes to what you just said.
Absolutely. And Ms. Behringer, I know when all of us are at home and we're looking at the beautiful snowfall and in front of the fireplace, our team is out there strapping on those trucks and those plows and going out there to ensure that we have safe travel the next day. So I just want you to know it is noticed. We do appreciate it, and thank you for all that you do. All right, our first item of business is to adopt our agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or a citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. Commissioners, do we have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. That takes us to our regular agenda with one item today. Key number 21896, FY 2025 roadway and ADA improvements, state-local agreement with the Idaho Transportation Department, and this is a request for approval. Mr. Furch, welcome.
Good morning, Madam President and members of the Commission. My name is Tom Furch. I'm the Transportation Funding Coordinator for ACHD. And today I'd like to talk to you about the fiscal year 2025 roadway and ADA improvement state and local agreement. And I'm going to need just click off the side. Gotcha. Okay, there we go. Now I got to go back. Sorry about that. Okay, there we are.
Awesome.
This state local agreement is a required instrument for ACHD to use fiscal year 2023 STBG TMA funds, which is a key part of ACHD's policy of seeking outside funding sources to supplement general funds for maintenance projects. With design projects, ACHD is reimbursed for costs incurred up to the amount of approved federal funds. ACHD is required to pay a match of 7.34%. This design agreement includes $528,000 in advanced construction. This is a design project with segments selected by ACHD's pavement engineer. Design includes geotech work to identify the type of pavement work to be completed. Design will also include alternative transportation facilities. We will be using a funding tool called Advanced Construction, which ACHD has used to advance previous federally funded projects. This roadway and ADA improvement project was originally scheduled for a design next year in 2023. The funding programmed in the TIP in 2018 was sufficient to cover the planned road and ADA improvements. With the Commission's new direction for an integrated maintenance approach to all road projects, staff have adjusted the schedule and cost of future roadway and ADA improvement projects. These adjustments to the schedule and budget will allow for a more complex design phase. Fortunately, the Federal Highway Administration has advanced construction guidance that will allow ACHD to make the necessary changes within the federal program. With this agreement, Federal Highways will allow ACHD to start designing the project this year and be reimbursed with next year's 2023 funding when it becomes available in the fiscal year. Also, ACHD can seek reimbursement of $528,000 in additional design funding up to the closure of the project. So we'll be able to maintain looking for funds to fill that throughout the life of the project. This is the recommendation, and I will stand for questions, Madam President.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Furch. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Just a comment, just like to tell you how glad I am that you work for us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
Thanks, Tom, for the presentation. And looking at the packet, I had some questions, and it wasn't really clear to me, especially, for the orchard piece, what kinds of construction or configurations are we talking about? Because we might have a very different idea about what should go there versus ITD.
I'll defer to Ryan.
Welcome, Mr. Head.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner Pickering. We're looking comprehensively as we go in there. We've identified, ITD doesn't just define which project we do that. It's just they're the ones who identify the funding and help us process the funding. So we are working to ensure that we're fully taking into account the bike, the pedestrian, all of those components as part of this project to make sure that it's a one and done type of improvement.
So that's really comforting to hear, because it wasn't really clear in this agreement that was the case. And so I'm just kind of concerned that maybe we'd get down to that way and then ITD would just say, you know what, no, we're going to do what we want to do, and just that's it.
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, no, we control what happens. We develop the design, we submit it, we get approval, we go through that whole process.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Madam
Commissioner
President,
Hanson.
and Ryan and Tom, the heartburn I have is that it's not in the contract, and that the reference in the contract is that this project shall be designed to the state's standards. We've adopted our own set of standards. We have a complete streets policy, with design guide. We now have performance measures, as you know, because you did such a fantastic job using that. But we don't reference that at all in here. And it's really troubling because it raises a lot of red flags, whether in fact we can, because it seems to me the state has all of the control as to whether and how, what standards we use. There's no reference to the fact that we have a number of key projects that we're investing in these neighborhoods that are going to be impacted by how we go into these two pieces of corridor. And I'll just raise that with on Orchard. And actually, sort of the flip side of my excitement of the RAISE grant on Philippi is to see this, knowing that Orchard's going to be addressed. There's going to be some money spent. There's going to be maintenance work done, and we want to try and do it with a more complex design. But there's absolutely no reference to what the standards are that we will be applying, because it's an isolated neighborhood. I have a tremendous amount of empathy for the folks who feel stuck there, and even more so. They've got the freeway to the south. It cuts across the south. They got Overland to the north, and they got Orchard. Orchard's the main one that they can get back and forth. That's where Hillcrest Elementary School is. There's Spalding, there's Targhee, and there's Malad. Those are the main crossings. They need to be substantially enhanced and protected to ensure that there's some safety in that neighborhood. Of course, the Philippi crossing on Orchard, on Overland is also critical. And so not seeing any of that reference in here, not seeing all of the knowledge that we have, that people like Christy Inselman has, and the reason why we developed the projects that we did in our integrated 5-year work plan is not here. And I think we should negotiate and make sure ITD knows that's how we're going to do it. I want to see that in the contract. It's really critical. There's bus stops also along there, and I know you referenced transit, but there's no reference to transit facilities. There's several key bus stops. There's a couple of them, and so people have to cross Orchard when they get off or get on. They'll be crossing Orchard a lot. So Orchard has to serve a lot of things. Boise's also investing huge amount in that development south. We're realigning Orchard in order to get to that. We're building these multi-use paths along the side of Orchard to encourage people to use Orchard as a biking corridor from those neighborhoods north.
So Commissioner Hanson?
So those things aren't in there, and Boise doesn't have any role, it seems to me, in the design, even though that's so critical.
Okay, Commissioner Hanson, I'm going to stop you right there so that they can address
Okay,
your
that's
first
the
question.
Orchard one, and then I
right,
think you'll probably know the
on
Vista
that.
one has issues too.
Go ahead. Let's,
Madam President,
Thank you,
Commissioner
Mr. Head.
Hanson, what you have before you today is a contract or an agreement with ITD to secure the funding. The next step is to develop the scope of work, to define what will actually be designed on the corridor. There's nothing in the process that precludes ACHD from using its standards, its treatments, the different types of things we're talking about. While it may reference the state has things, they may not build their projects to the way that we would build them, but they do have in their design guides other facilities that would allow us to continue to do what we want to do on the project.
Mr. Head, this is the same language that we've had in our other agreements that we've had.
Madam President, yes, we've been signing these agreements for many years.
All right, thank you.
Um,
All right.
So
And I
well,
think
that's
you
my
had a
question.
follow-on,
Yeah.
Mr. Hanson.
But before
So
he
that's my
goes to a
question,
different
why can't we
project,
put that in the agreement? Because the reference, it's a shift, we want to have an integrated maintenance approach to integrate all of this, and yet we're using the old agreement format? It doesn't make sense. If we're gonna have an integrated one, and we're gonna get the state to be a partner with us, and if it doesn't go forward, because we bear a lot of liability for paying back stuff that the state would pay for. So they can say, no, you're not gonna do this, you're not gonna do this, that's not our standards. And then we end up having to pay the state money. The contract is written in a way that puts all the responsibility on ACHD, but the standards, our standards and our priorities aren't reflected in the contract. I can't understand it.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I can defer to our legal counsel of any concern that they may have with the contract and liability it puts on us, but ultimately, the state's role in this is only to be a pass-through. They help us make sure that we secure the federal funding, and they review the plans to make sure they meet those federal standards. The federal standards, as you hear, are continually changing, and what we're proposing to design would be exactly in alignment with that. We have not had concerns with them not approving the type of improvements that we're talking about. So the state's role is really limited in simply just ensuring that we meet those federal standards and giving us that go-ahead so that we can get the funding.
Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Head. Commissioner Pickering.
Yeah, thank you. Before we move on to the different project, Commissioner Hanson, I just had a couple other questions. So, Ryan, can you explain then, so if this is just to get the pass-through like you've described for the funding, right? And then a lot of this would be worked out through a scope of work. Does that scope of work come to us, or do you work with ITD staff to accommodate that?
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, we developed the scope of work. And then ITD, because of the process, they advertise it for us, but we develop that scope of work and define what goes in it and what's going to be included in the project.
Okay, well, I think, Commissioner Hanson brings up some really good points, but I trust that, to your point, that, this is the standard language that we've used, and we've been able to have that, control and buy-in and influence over other projects with these types of agreements in the past. It gives me some comfort, but I would like to just provide some feedback as it relates to the scope of work, since we won't be part of that, which is fine. I've seen how, and you've all seen certain projects that ITD has done, especially when it comes to ADA compliance and just understanding the community, and they miss the boat completely, or haphazardly. So just making sure that all of the things that we've worked so hard on, you've worked so hard on, really comes to the forefront in these design elements, and that we don't, to Commissioner Hansen's point, aren't responsible for something that doesn't meet our guidelines at all, and it creates an unsafe environment for our communities. And I guess my other question is, how does this segment connect to northern parts of Orchard? Because there's so much going on in those parts as well, and that's not really, obviously not covered in this, but what's kind of the thought process between this improved segment and then the unimproved segment, and what would be the connection piece there, if any?
The vision. Yes.
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, ultimately, these projects, they're originally driven by maintenance treatment, right? The goal is to ensure that we're maintaining the system. The section just to the north of this has recently received some maintenance. However, we have other projects around Clark Street, Orchard and Clark, that we will be looking at. We have another maintenance project coming up in this next year or two, just north of Emerald. So we will continually be looking at this and how it ties in. The neighborhood plans for this and also for Vista really looked at those alternate routes in terms of the bike ped facilities. However, connecting up to that key commercial center there and having that access there, that will be one of those key things that we'll be looking at, is how do we bring people to that place where there's jobs, where there's food, where there's other things, and making sure that we're making that connection appropriately.
And Ryan, isn't that the section where that gal was hit and killed, a pedestrian that was hit and killed? Wasn't she in and around that area in the industrial park? Was it last year, I believe?
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering, I'm not aware.
So I guess, and this was something that I wanted to bring up later. I mean, we didn't have time with the director's report, but just to build on our, crash data conversation that we had. I want to make sure that, because it is such an industrial part, there's all these elements that there's still going to be people that walk and bike there, right? To your point, right? They're trying to get to jobs, they're trying to do all those things. And previously it was really dangerous. So making sure that crash data is part of that conversation would be really critical.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldberg?
Just a trip down memory lane real quick with regards to some projects that this sort of an agreement covered, and that was when we were building the intersection at Black Cat and Franklin. I think there were several things that came up during that project from the acquisition of right-of-way on up to where it wasn't specifically covered, and yet it worked out just fine. So I have no problem with this agreement at all.
Thank you.
Madam President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Yeah, if I may ask a couple questions. Tom, could we go back to the, I don't know if the slide presentation is still available. I just want to make sure I have a clear picture on the numbers and the costs that are involved. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So, I'm just trying to get a handle on the numbers. That 7.34% match number doesn't appear to be reflected in these numbers that I'm looking at here. So I just want to make sure I know how do these, the 1.2 million, the 528,000, how do these things relate together? What are the total, give me the total number picture on this.
President May, Commissioner McKinney, in the staff report, there is a table there that shows the funding for the design phase. So the design total right now is the $1,244,000.
Okay.
But that includes, so there's the match for that is $82,000.
Okay.
So ACHD does the work and submits invoices and is reimbursed for the work that is completed by ACHD, is reimbursed from ITD less the match amount.
Okay. And the block grant is both, it includes money for the design and a portion of the construction funding? Is that what we're saying?
The construction funding, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, the construction funding will be a separate agreement. So you will see that at a future date after the design is completed. The a separate construction agreement will come before you.
Okay, so that phrase advanced construction funding, that's really just design work.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, that is one of the inartful understandings on this term. When they say advanced construction, it does allow for advanced design, but it's just one term, advanced construction.
So it's called advanced construction money, but it's actually intended for design.
Correct.
Okay. Let me then just ask you, just to clarify, I noticed and it may be on the prior slide from this one, talking about, there we go, at the bottom. The project design will include alternative transportation facilities. Is that intended to refer to bus stops, bike facilities, pedestrian facilities? Is that what that means?
President May and Commissioner McKinney, yes, as the commission has directed ACHD staff to design in additional pedestrian and bicycle facilities into our projects, those are the alternative transportation facilities that will be considered during the design phase.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you very much.
Mr. Furch, the total cost, 1.2 million. Would you speak to the reimbursement back to ACHD? I had a figure on my list, what, 96.7%? Is that related to the 1.2, Director Wong? The reimbursement back to ACHD, what are we looking at?
Madam President, it's less than 7.34%, so 92.66%.
Okay, so that's a significant amount then that will be reimbursed back to ACHD. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Certainly.
So maybe,
Commissioner Hanson.
maybe you can tell me, Tom. I appreciate you say the description of the alternative transportation. It's actually multimodal. Is there a reason why it wasn't put into the contract? The description that's on the slide wasn't included in the contract.
I'll have to take a number. Mr. Lucas.
Good afternoon, Commission President. For the record, my name is Justin Lucas, Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management for the Eddy County Highway District. Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I really do think this is just maybe a misunderstanding of where we are in the project phase and what the purpose of this contract is. This contract is not to bind ACHD in any way related to the design elements of the project. This is a contract that is drafted by ITD. It is used across the state of Idaho with all other local agencies, these state and local agreements. So it's not unique to ACHD. And what these contracts do is they basically lay out the dollars and cents of who's responsible for what, and from a funding perspective. And they make us sign these contracts before we're even able to draft the scope of work or create or hire a design consultant or negotiate how this money will be spent and what those design elements will be. And it's very, very focused on the administration of the federal funds. And it is not at all focused on the project elements other than a very high level description, as you can see in the document. And so it is, if we try to go back to ITD, just as an example, and include a very detailed description of the scope of work and the project elements and all those things, they would not allow us to include those in this contract.
So can I ask you, I'm not asking that we include a scope of work. I'm asking that, just as you said, our design decisions control, that we would be the ones to say, so you've seen me on this commission now for 9 years, and there's been more than one occasion where we've gotten to the point we're looking at a design and we are told we can't change it. Otherwise, we have to pay all this money to ITD. And so we are stuck. And now we have even better criteria for evaluating how a design of an arterial is going to impact the neighborhoods. We now can say, when we do this, we're going to have a higher level of traffic stress, so we want to adjust that. Why can't we have a reference to our own policies in the contract? So that we can say, this is what we want, and we don't feel constrained, and we don't get to the point where by the time the commission looks at the design, we're told, you can't change it much because otherwise we'll have to pay all this money back. And
Mr.
it's
Price.
not only that, we'll miss the opportunity to fund this. I just don't understand why we can't protect the hard-won standards that we've developed in language in our own contracts.
Well, I will let Steve speak to the contractual agreements we have with ITD, but I just want to briefly add that I think the scenarios, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, that you're describing are referring to times when we're approaching construction and it's a design that was already done. These agreements and scopes of work and all that had already been completed, and there was a desire potentially to change it at that point. I think that's what you're referencing. We are years in advance of that happening now, and based on the Commission's direction, staff has made the commitment that we will include these elements in the scopes of work as directed by the Commission. So in a way, we're in a new paradigm, and it has really nothing to do with this agreement. It has a lot more to do with the scope of work and the design agreement with the consultant that will come back before you when we sign it, based on the size of this specific contract.
Thank you for restating that, Mr. Lucas. I think there's just a little bit of confusion about the timeline. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Madam President,
Welcome back.
Commissioners. Yep, Steve Price, General Counsel. I think Justin's kind of hit it on the head, and that is this is more about the process than it is about the substance. And the process is the purpose of the agreement is really to start the process for us to secure funding for this project or multiple projects. The reason why the language is in there about ITD is you have to understand, like Compass, on these type of projects, they are our conduit. The only way we can't deal directly with the federal government under the federal funding agreement. The way that it works on these type of projects is it goes through ITD. And the purpose of the language of ITD having that information is to make sure that the federal funding that we get meets all of the federal standards. You might have some communities that would get in there and do something inconsistent with that. That's at a very, very initial funding step of the agreement. When it comes down to the scope of work, then that's when we most certainly can include that in the scope of work. We will bring you the scope of work before we even submit it, and you will be assured that all of the things that the Commission is interested in are included in that. That is at the time to have this conversation, not really at this initial
Right,
phase.
yeah, this is the instrument to get the funding
To start the
ball
process
rolling.
for the design, and we have all the control, and in the past, on the scope of work, ITD's never batted an eye. They do have some interest in the design. There's a state statute, at least well, none of these are state highways, so I'm not gonna even go into that. But at the same time, one of the rules under the ADA, and that's why that's included within this, is that on these type of projects, when we're there, we're required by the ADA to make those type of pedestrian improvements. If the language were, and we didn't do that, ITD needs to be in the position under the agreement to say, well, we're going to shut off your funding. You're not meeting federal law. That's the only time that it's applied. And I can assure you that when we get going on the scope of work, Justin and his team, Tom will not have to be here for that, but his team, they will present that, and you'll have the impact. The other problem is this type of funding doesn't really get into the transit end of it. There is no, like the ADA, there's no federal law that says if you go in there, you got to build transit facilities. I'm sorry, that's just the business that we're in with federal funding. It doesn't, wish it did, but doesn't. So that's why that particular mode isn't. We most certainly can, in the scope of work, we can add that, and maybe ITD and FHW might approve it. Doesn't hurt to ask. But within the parameters, the goalposts of this funding request, it's not included.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Price. Commissioner Hanson?
So Steve, it says under the contract, specifically under the general provisions, the project shall be designed to state standards, shall be designed to the state standards. No reference to our standards. And I understand there's a floor of what the feds and the ADA requires, basic compliance. We have worked incredibly hard to set better standards because we understand that's what makes neighborhoods livable, how people can feel safe using them. Technically, something might meet a state or federal standard, but it doesn't, it's not conducive to the health and safety of that neighborhood. So why can't we reference that in this contract? And why hasn't this contract been updated since we've agreed to integrate maintenance projects with the more complex design so that we're one and done in an area?
Well, we most certainly can request ITD if it's, the will of the commission to state that it'll be built to state and ACHD standards. But that is typically something, again, you have to understand why that language is there. They have to have the final authority because they are the conduit for the federal funding.
They're controlling the money.
So you mean by citing our standards, they don't have the final authority? It's not mutually exclusive to me.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, I think to clarify what is being referenced when it says state standards. So the projects, when they are designed, there's the standards being referenced specifically are the CAD standards, the drawing standards that we have to use so that when the plans are transmitted over to ITD to go out to bid, that they meet those standards. Standards associated with their contracting and their procurement rules and responsibilities. I think what's being inferred here is that that the state has some broad standards associated with sidewalk width or bicycle facilities. They don't. This is not the standards that they're referencing. And so, just to be clear, by following that requirement and regulation, there is no state standard that restricts ACHD from pursuing the project design elements that you have asked us to pursue. There is no state standard that would restrict us to do that. Historically, to your point earlier, Commissioner Hanson, there may have been a timing issue associated with when we received a question about a project from a commissioner or the commission and what we were able to accomplish at that point in the process. What I can say is at this point in the process, we have the full range of options, the full menu of facilities before us to include in these projects.
So let me ask a specific example. We're moving forward on Rose Hill. And Christy Inselman came and visited the site, and she actually saw firsthand, and that's why we're looking at traffic calming on Rose Hill, largely because of the configuration of Vista at the intersection of Rose Hill and Vista. It's incredibly wide, and you can make an easy right turn without stopping and accelerate actually through the curve as you're going into that neighborhood. And then the sight lines make it problematic and unsafe. So some of the issues that have to be resolved to ensure we meet the goals of traffic calming on Rose Hill have to happen on Vista. And the reverse happens as people accelerate to go south onto Vista off of Rose Hill because they're given an extra lane. So they got like 2 turning right turn lanes. They already have 2 left turn lanes. There's no through, you have to turn. So they get basically the space for 2. And then when they turn south onto Vista, they've got 3 through travel lanes for more than a block. It goes all the way to the canal. You've got incredible width. So the configuration and the design of Vista at the very spot where this money is going to be spent needs some significant changes in order to achieve the goals that we say we want to achieve on Rose Hill. They're not mutually exclusive. And I can see ITD saying, no, that's Rose Hill's not our problem. And we're just going to continue. We're not going to change the alignment or the way in which acceleration can happen on that segment of Vista, even though it's a very different environment as you travel from, up Capitol Boulevard, there's no cross streets, and then boom, you're up, and now you're starting to hit businesses and neighborhoods. And at that speed and at that width, it just doesn't make sense. And so that's why I say, I can't imagine under this, even them looking at a reconfiguration of Vista. In the old days, it was like, well, all we're gonna do is fix the pavement and make sure the ped ramps are at the right angle, and so that, of course, the width also affects the crossing distance. It's very long, and as people are accelerating underneath that very long distance, it's very dangerous to cross Vista at that point, but that's the only crossing.
So, Mr. Price,
I want to know whether that will be incorporated.
Hold on, I know you've asked that question now several times. I think you're trying to explain to us that this is not the point that would be addressed. This is a standard contract that we have operated under before. It's merely the instrument in order to obtain the funding, correct? I've heard Mr. Head state that we are looking at the vision. We are looking at the other neighborhoods, to Commissioner Pickering's initial question. So that's all going to be taken into account as we scope this project and move forward. So I'm confident that we are in a good place and could move forward with approving this today and getting this project started, and the steps and the procedures that have been outlined by Mr. Head and Mr. Lucas and Mr. Price here today. So if there's anything more to add that we haven't already discussed, Commissioner Picker or Commissioner Goldberg.
What's his name?
Yeah, you on the end.
I don't really have anything to add. I was just going to beg and plead for the appropriate time to make a motion.
All right, I'll let you know.
May I just make one comment? I just want to thank Justin and Ryan and Commissioner Hanson, because these are questions that I had, and trying to understand what are state standards, right? And you explaining and answering some of his concerns helps me better understand these different processes and elements, and when can we provide the input when it's the right time, and all of those different nuggets. And then him saying that there's these other examples of what might have happened, you explaining about what might have happened. That's all really helpful. So I know this dragged on a lot longer than maybe some people have wanted, but I just want to say that this conversation is really helpful and beneficial to me. Thank you.
Good, and that's the whole goal of this. I think we just need to understand that this is not the vehicle to put all the additional language in. And so I'm glad if your questions have been answered, but I just want to move forward, and not just keep asking the same question. Mr. Price?
Madam President, and Commissioner Hanson, many of the points the design issues that you've raised with those particular projects are important. Most certainly, staff will be taking consideration. But those aren't necessarily important today in adopting this agreement. When the scope of work comes back, then that's the time to have the conversation and address the issues that you raised today.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's my point. This is just a whole different conversation here. And then everything that Commissioner Hanson has addressed today, it's on the record, and we will make sure that those items are addressed going forward at the appropriate time.
Madam President,
Okay.
I'm sorry,
No.
go ahead. Kent, you wanted to make a motion.
Yeah.
I sure did.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Madam President, I would like to move that we approve item number 1, which is key number 21896, fiscal year 2025, roadway and ADA improvement, state and local government, SLA, with the Idaho Transportation Department.
Thank you. We have a
Second.
motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion?
Madam President, I would make a substitute motion that we return this to legal counsel to allow us to reference our own standards in the contract, because this is a generic contract, and I'd like it to reference the accomplishments of this agency to review and apply its own standards to the design of any project.
Okay, we have a substitute motion. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Back to the original motion. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, public communications, Ms. Spencer? No one. All right. And no one in the audience? All right, then
Madam President, before we dismiss,
we'll have commission discussion right after this.
Okay.
But this is, yeah, just any public communications from members of the public? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Now, post-commission agenda, commission administrative discussion, Commissioner McKinney.
if you have specific items that are on your agenda for discussion here, please go ahead. I just have a couple of comments.
Nope, I'm just getting us in the right place. No, you go
Okay.
right ahead. Got the floor.
We have all been anticipating getting all the information that would allow us to address the redistricting question. And I don't believe we have all that information ready yet. And I'm sure the director will address that question. But I just wanted to add two comments that as we approach this, two thoughts, and this is just my opinion, but two thoughts as we approach the question. Number one, it seems to me that the sort of center of mass of each of the districts ought to be generally retained in the rough geographic location that they currently are. That's number one. And number two, the discussion about apportionment and the sort of the, the tolerance for variance of the different districts as far as population goes. I know there's a certain tolerance level, and my preference would be, and again, this is just my opinion, my preference would be that we try to get them as equal as possible population-wise, given that the demographic forces and shifts that have caused the current imbalance that's requiring redistricting in the first place are going to continue to push in the same directions, generally speaking. And the closer we can get to being equal in size now, the better off we'll be, or the less lopsided we'll be in the future when those changes, 10 years from now, when those changes have continued to have their effect. So,
All right, thank
just
you.
wanted to put that out
And
there.
I think that's the goal of the redistricting, is to even out and make sure that we're leveling off those population numbers, correct?
Yeah.
I think the catch for us is that we can't get too involved in being specific about what we would like to see. But in generality, that's helpful, and appreciate your comments. All right.
Well, I would make
Amy?
a comment. I have had the opportunity to speak with all the county commissioners and thank them for their efforts on their redistricting and how quickly and easily and evenly that happened. And I don't think we will do anything any different than that.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam President. Yeah, I appreciate the extension of the discussion or the review of crossings on 14th Street. Some concerns from neighbors have come to my attention, and I know it's an area I haven't paid as close attention to. The really, really good thing about that segment of State Street is the width of the street varies, which forces people to pay attention as they're approaching the core, which is the appropriate thing to do. You don't want them to operate without realizing where they're, basically State Street is coming very close, and by the time it reaches the State House, it's very, very tight. And as they're approaching that, and there's a turn lane on 8th. So I'm hopeful we will not be ripping up any of the curbing and widening those streets, but I want to make sure that happens, because I think the crossing distances are good on that segment of State Street between basically 15th and the State House. So I just want to make sure we fully evaluate that and aren't doing it. One of the things that struck me is like, well, since we don't manage urban forestry, that the city does, that I assume when we say we're going to take out trees or put in trees, that we have agreements with the city that they're going to maintain them. This isn't a CCDC urban renewal district. And I must say, they've done a really good job of putting those aquacells, for tree preservation, and the vertical elements that trees provide is so important in order to keep people from, when they got the lights all in line, from assuming they can just go straight on through. The old Burn Studio site, I think, is fantastic because it forces everybody to pay attention to how fast they're driving as they're approaching downtown. The second is I'd like a report back on how we're fixing some of the um, existing flaws of the intersection of Boise Avenue, Beacon, and Protest with the new development that's going in on that corner. We haven't had anything come to us. But as you know, Boise Avenue is quite constrained, fortunately, at both ends, east and west. It's kind of not exactly east-west, but unfortunately, at that intersection, Boise Avenue just goes really wide, and there's a bunch of striped lines there just to fill in space because it's not a travel lane. And here's an opportunity actually to fix the alignment on both sides of that intersection. But I don't know that any of that's being done, and I'm not sure how the sidewalks are going to affect the developers are going to put in. It's going to affect that, or it just kicks that issue down the road for later on. So I'd like a report back on that. That's an issue that's been raised with the neighbors in that area. Is this chronic problem going to be fixed with this new development?
Madam President,
Commissioner Pickering.
I just have one nugget. I was just going to direct it at the director. If you could give us your next director's report or whatever, just some insight and clarity around how have we moved on from that crash data conversation with Chief Lee and Sheriff Clifford. So, because I think internally, I know staff has been shifting into conversations, but we haven't had a formal report back. And then I'd like to know as well as how can we start, weaving in crash data and making sure that it's part of your guys' conversation, so then it's part of the presentations to us, so we can make better decisions about projects and designs and things like that.
Good point. I know with the State Street project, we've gotten a lot of additional information or concerns from the city of Boise. I did get a phone call from Councilperson Clegg, and she did raise the question about the trees that Commissioner Hansen just brought up. And I know there's been some concern about that crossing. I did let her know that our comment period has been extended, I believe, through the 21st. So she was happy to hear that. So I look forward to seeing what additional input that we'll be getting on that project. So I just wanted to add that to our discussion. All right, anything else? All right, thank you, everybody. Director Wong, did you have something? Yeah, okay.